Chapter 1. Once when I was 6, I saw a magnificent picture in the book of the jungle called True Stories. It showed a boa constrictor swallowing a wild beast. Here's a copy of the picture. In the book it said boa constrictors swallow their prey whole without chewing. Afterward, they are no longer able to move, and they sleep during 6 months of their digestion. In those days, I thought a lot about jungle adventures and eventually managed to make my first drawing. Using this colored pencil, my drawing number 1 looked like this. I showed the grown-ups my masterpiece and I asked them if my drawing had scared them. They answered, "Why be scared of a hat?" My drawing was not a picture of a hat, it was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. When I drew the inside of the boa constrictor, grown-ups would understand. They always needed explanations. My drawing number 2 looked like this. The grown-ups advised me to put away my drawings of boa constrictors outside or inside and apply myself instead to geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar. That's why I abandoned, at the age of 6, a magnificent career as an artist. But I had been discouraged by the failure of my drawing number 1 and had been drawing number 2. Grown-ups had never understood anything by themselves. It was exhausting for children to have to provide explanations over and over again. So then I had to choose another career, and I learned pilot airplanes. I have flown almost everywhere in the world, and as a matter of fact, geography has been a big help to me. I could tell China from Arizona at first glance, which is very useful if you get lost during the night. So I have had, in the course of my life, lots of encounters with lots of serious people. I have spent lots of time with grown-ups. I have seen them at close range with not much approved opinion of them. Whenever I encountered a grown-up who seemed to be all enlightened, I would experiment on him with my drawing number 1, which I always kept, but I wanted to see if he really understood anything. But he always answered, "That's a hat." Then I wouldn't talk about boa constrictors or jungles or stars. I would put myself on the level and talk about bridge and golf and politics and neckties. And my grown-up was glad to know as much a reasonable person. Chapter 2. So I lived all alone without anyone I could really talk to, until I had to make a crash landing in the Sahara Desert 6 years ago. Something in my plane's engine had broken, and since I had neither a mechanic nor passengers on the plane with me, I had been preparing to undertake a difficult repair job by myself. For me, it was a matter of life or death. I had only enough drinking water for 8 days. The first night, then, I went to sleep in the sand 1,000 miles from any inhabited country. I was more isolated than a man shipwrecked on the raft in the middle of the ocean. So you can imagine my surprise when I was awakened at daybreak by a funny little voice saying, "Please, draw me a shape." What? Draw me a shape! I leaped as if I had been struck by lightning. I rubbed my eyes hard and I stared. I saw an extraordinary little fellow staring back at us very seriously. Here's the best portrait I could manage to make him later on, but of course, my drawing is much less attractive than my model. It's not my fault. My career as a painter was discouraged at the age of 6 by grown-ups, and I never learned how to draw anything except boa constrictors, outside and inside. So I stared wide-eyed at the apparition. Don't forget that I was about 1,000 miles from any inhabited territory, yet this little fellow seemed to be neither lost nor dying of exhaustion, hunger, or thirst, nor did he seem scared to death. There was nothing in appearance that suggested the child was lost in the middle of the desert 1,000 miles from any inhabited territory. Then I finally managed to speak. I asked him, "But what are you doing here?" Then he repeated very slowly and very seriously, "Please, draw me a shape." In a face of overpowering mystery, you don't dare disobey. Absurd as it seemed, 1,000 miles from all inhabited regions in danger of death, I took a scrap of paper and pen out of my pocket. Then I remembered that I was mostly studied geography, history, and arithmetic and grammar. I told the little fellow, rather crossly, that I hadn't know how to draw. He replied, that doesn't matter. Draw me a shape." Since I had never drawn a sheep, I made him one of the only 2 drawings I knew how to make. The one of the boa constrictor from outside, and I was answered the yellow fellow answered, No, I don't want an elephant inside a boa constrictor. A boa constrictor is very dangerous, and an elephant would get in the way. Where I live, everything's very small. I need a sheep. Draw me a sheep." So then I made a drawing. He looked at it carefully and then said, "No, this one's already quite sick. Make another." I made another drawing. My friend gave me a kind, indulgent smile. "You can see for yourself. That's not a sheep. It's a ram. It has horns." So I made a third drawing, but it just rejected the others. "This one's too old. I want a sheep that'll live a long time." So then, impatiently, since I was in a hurry to start working on my engine, I scribbled this drawing and added, "This is just to crate keep the sheep you want inside it." But I was amazed to see my young critic's face light up. "That's just the kind I wanted. Do you want the sheep you think the sheep will need a lot of grass?" "Why?" "Because where I live, everything's very small." There's sure to be enough. I've given you a very small sheep." He then bent over the drawing. "Not so small as that. Look, he's gone to sleep." And that's how I made an acquaintance of the little prince. Chapter 3. It took me a long time to understand where he came from. The little prince who asked me so many questions never seemed to hear the ones I asked him. It was things he said quite random that bit by bit explained everything. For instance, he first caught sight of my airplane. I won't draw my airplane. That would be too complicated for me, he asked. "What's that thing over there?" "It's not a thing, it flies. It's an airplane, my airplane." And I was proud to tell him I could fly. And he exclaimed, "What? You fell out of the sky?" "Yes," I said modestly. "Oh, that's funny," said the little prince, broke into a lovely peal of laughter, which annoyed me a good deal. I like my misfortune to be taken seriously. Then he added, "So you fell out of the sky too. What planet are you from?" That was when I had the first clue to the mystery of his presence, and I questioned him sharply, "Do you come from another planet?" But he made no answer. He shook his head a little while staring at my airplane. "Of course! That couldn't have brought you very far." And he fell into the reverie of the last long while. Then, while taking my sheep out of his pocket, he plunged into contemplation of his treasure. You can imagine how intrigued I was by his hint about other planets. I tried to learn more. "Where do you come from, little fellow? Where I live? Where is this where I live of yours? Where will you be taking my sheep?" After a thoughtful silence, he answered, "The good thing about a crate that you've given me is that he can use it for a house after dark." "Of course. If you're good, I'll give you a rope to tie him up during the day, and stakes to tie him too." The proposition seemed to shock the little prince. "Tie him up? What a funny idea! But if you don't tie him up, he'll wander off somewhere and get lost." My friend burst out laughing. "Where could he go?" "Anywhere, straight ahead," the little prince remarked quite seriously. "Even if he did, everything's so small where I live." And he added, perhaps just a little sadly, "Straight ahead, you can't go very far." That's just how I learned Chapter 4. That was how I learned a very important thing, which was the planet he came from was hardly bigger than a house. That couldn't surprise me much. I knew very well that except the huge planets like Earth, Jupiter, Mars, and Venus, which have been given names, there are hundreds of others are sometimes so small that it's very difficult to see them through a telescope. When an astronomer discovers one of them, he gives it a number instead of a name. For instance, he would call it asteroid 325. I have serious reasons to believe that the prince came from an asteroid B612. This asteroid has been sighted once by a telescope in 1909 by a Turkish astronomer who had made a formal demonstration of the discovery by International Astronomical Congress. But no one had believed him on the account of the way he was dressed. Grown-ups are like that. Fortunately, the reputation of asteroid B612, a Turkish dictator, ordered his people to pain of death to wear European clothes. The astronomer repeated the demonstration in 1920 wearing a very elegant suit, and this time everyone believed him. If I've told you these details about asteroid B612, and I've given you this number on account of the grown-ups like numbers. When you tell them about a new friend, they never ask questions about what really matters. They never ask, what does his voice sound like? What games does he like best? Does he collect butterflies? They ask, how old is he? How many brothers does he have? How much does he weigh? How much money does his father make? Only then do they know him. If you tell grown-ups, I saw a beautiful red brick house with geraniums out of windows and doves on the roof. They won't be able to imagine such a house. You have to tell them, I saw a house worth 100,000 francs. And then they exclaim, what a pretty house. Little Prince on asteroid B612, if you have the picture. So if you tell them the proof of the little prince's existence is be delightful that he laughed and he wanted a sheep. Then when someone wants a sheep, that proves he exists. They shrug their shoulders and treat you like a child, but if you tell them the planet he came from was asteroid B612, then they'll be convinced that they won't bother you with other questions. That's the way they are. You must not hold it against them. Children should be very understanding to grown-ups, but of course, those of us who understand life couldn't care less about numbers. I should have liked to begin my story with a fairy tale, but I would have liked to say, once upon a time there was a little prince who lived on a planet hardly any bigger than he was, and who needed a friend. For those who understand life, that would sound much truer. The fact is, I don't want my book to be taken lightly. Telling these memories is so painful for me. It's already been 6 years since my friend went away, taking his sheep with him. If I try to describe him here, so I won't forget him. It's sad to forget a friend. Not everyone has a friend, and I might become like the grown-ups who are no longer interested in anything but numbers, which is still another reason why I've bought the box of paints and some pencils, which hard to go back to drawing at my age, when you've never made any attempts since the one of boa from inside and the one of the boa from outside, the age of 6. I'll certainly try to make my portraits as true to life as possible, but I'm not entirely sure of succeeding. One drawing works, and the next no longer bears any resemblance, and I'm a little off on his height, too. In this one, the little prince is too tall, and here he's too short, and I'm uncertain about the color of his suit. So I grope in one direction and another the best I can, and in the end I'm sure to be certain of more important details all wrong. But here you'll have to forgive me. My friend never explained anything. Perhaps he thought I was like himself, but I, unfortunately, cannot see a sheep through the sides of a crate. I may have a little like the grown-ups, but I have grown old. Chapter 5. Every day I learned something about the little prince's planet, about the departure, about his journey. I would become quite gradually in the course of his remarks, and just how I learned on the third day about the drama of the Bobabs. This time, too, I had the sheep to thank, for suddenly the little prince asked me a question as if overcome by a grave doubt.
Isn't it true that sheep eat bushes?
Yes, that's right.
Ah, I'm glad.
I didn't understand why it was so important to the sheep eat bushes, but the little prince added,
and therefore they eat baobabs too.
I pointed out to the little prince that baobabs are not bushes, but trees are tall as churches, and that even if the whole herd of elephants pack of the planet, that herd wouldn't finish off a single baobab. The idea of the herd of elephants made the little prince laugh.
We have a pile of them on top of one another.
Then he observed precariously,
before they grow big, baobabs start out by being little.
True enough.
But why don't you want your sheep to eat little baobabs?
He answered,
oh, come on,
as if we were talking about the same thing quite obvious, and I was forced to make great mental effort to understand the problem all by myself. And in fact, the little prince's planet, where we're as all on planets, good plants and bad plants. The good plants come from good seeds, and the bad plants came from bad seeds. But the seeds were invisible. They sleep in the secrecy of the ground until one of them decides to wake up and stretches and begins to sprout quite timidly at first, and charming, harmless little twig reaching toward the sun as a radish seed or a rosebush seed. You can let it sprout all it likes, but if the seed of a bad plant, you must pull the plant up right away, as soon as you can recognize it. As it happens, before were terrible seeds in the little prince's planet. Baobab seeds, the plant's soil is infested with them. Now if you tend to the baobab too late, you can never get rid of it again. It overgrows the whole planet. Its roots pierce right through, and if the planet is too small and there's not too many baobabs, they can make it burst into pieces.
It's a question of discipline, the little princess told me later on. When you finish washing and dressing each morning, you tend to your planet. You must be sure you pull up all the baobabs regularly, as soon as you can tell them apart from the rose bushes, which they closely resemble when they're very young. It's a very tedious work, but very easy.
But one day he advised me to do my best to make a beautiful drawing of the edification of the children where I live.
If they travel someday, he told me, it would be useful to them. Sometimes there's no harm in postponing your work until later, but with baobabs, it's always a catastrophe. I know one planet that was inhabited by a lazy man. He had neglected 3 bushes.
So following the little prince's instructions, I have drawn a planet. I don't know much assuming the tone of the Mullerists, but the danger of baobabs is so little recognized that the risk run by anyone who might get lost at the asteroid are so considerable that for once I make an exception for my inhabitable reserve. I say, children, watch out for baobabs. It's to warn my friends of the danger, which they, like myself, have long been aware that I worked so hard on this drawing. The lesson I'm teaching is worth the trouble. If you may be asking, why are there no drawings in the book of the tree big as the drawing of the baobabs? There's a simple answer. I tried, but I couldn't manage it. When I drew baobabs, I was inspired by the sense of urgency. Chapter 6. Oh, little prince, gradually this is how I came to understand your sad little life. For a long time, your only entertainment was the pleasure of sunsets. I learned this new detail this morning on the 4th day when you told me.
I really like sunset.
So, go look at one now.
But we have to wait.
What for?
For the sun to set.
The first you seemed quite surprised, and then you laughed for yourself, and then you said to me,
I think I'm still at home.
Indeed, when it's noon in the United States, the sun, as everyone knows, is setting over France. If you could fly to France in 1 minute, you could watch the sunset. Unfortunately, France is much too far, but on your tiny planet, that's all you had to do was move your chair a few feet, and you would watch the twilight whenever you wanted to.
One day I saw the sun set 44 times,
and a little later you added,
when you're feeling very sad, sunsets are wonderful.
And on the day of the 44 times, are you feeling very sad? But the little prince didn't answer. Chapter 6. On the 5th day, thanks again to the sheep, another secret of the little prince's life was revealed to me. Abruptly, with no preamble, he asked me, as if it were the fruit of the problem, he long ponders in silence,
if a sheep eats bushes, does it eat flowers too?
A sheep eats whatever it finds.
Even flowers that have thorns?
Yes, even flowers that have thorns.
Then what good are thorns?
I don't know. At that moment, I was very busy trying to unscrew the bolt that was jammed in my engine. I was quite worried, for my plane crash was beginning to seem extremely serious, but the lack of drinking water made me fear the worst.
What good are horns?
The little prince never let go of the question once he had asked it. It was annoyed by a little jammed bolt, and I answered about thinking. Thorns are no good for anything. They're just the flower's way of being mean.
Oh!
But after silence, he lashed out at me with a sort of bitterness.
I don't believe you. Flowers are weak. You're naive. They reassure themselves that whatever they can, they believe their thorns are making them frightening.
I had made no answers. At this moment, I was thinking, if this bolt stays jammed, I'll knock it off with a hammer. Again, the little prince disturbed my reflection.
Then you think flowers?
No, not at all. I don't think anything. I just said whatever came into my head. I'm busy here with something serious. He stared at me, astounded.
Something serious?
He saw me holding my hammer, fingers black with grease, bending over an object he regarded as very ugly.
You talk like a grown-ups.
It made me a little ashamed, but he added mercilessly,
You confuse everything. You got 'em all mixed up.
He was really very annoyed. He tossed his golden curls in the wind.
I know a planet's inhabited by a red-faced gentleman. He's never smelled a flower. He's never looked at a star. He's never loved anyone. He's never done anything except add numbers. And all day long, he says over and over, just like you, I'm a serious man, and puffs him up with pride. But he's not a man at all. He's a mushroom. He's a what? A mushroom.
The little prince was now quite pale with rage.
For millions of years, flowers have been producing thorns. For millions of years, sheep have been eating them all the same. And it's not serious trying to understand why flowers go to such trouble to produce thorns. That's good for nothing. No, it's not important. The war between sheep and the flowers is no more serious and more important than the numbers of the fat red gentlemen added up. Suppose I happen to know a unique flower, one that exists nowhere in the world except on my planet. One that little sheep can white out in a single bite in one morning. Just like that, without even realizing what he's doing. That isn't important.
His face turned red now, and he went on.
If someone loves a flower which just one example exists among all the millions and millions of stars, that's enough to make him happy. And then he looks at the stars, he tells himself, my flower, somewhere. And if the sheep leaves the flowers, then for him it's as if suddenly all the flowers went out. That isn't important.
He couldn't say another word. All of a sudden, he burst out sobbing. Boo-hoo-hoo. Night had fallen. I dropped my tools, and what I did care about my hammer, about my bolt, about thirst and death. There was one star. One on a planet, on mine, the earth, the little prince to be consoled. I took him in my arms. I rocked him. I told him, the flower you love is not in danger. I'll show you a muzzle for your sheep. I'll draw you a fence for your flower. I didn't know what to say. How clumsy I felt. I didn't know how to reach him, where to find him. This is so mysterious. The land of tears. Chapter 7. I soon learned about the flower better. On the little prince's planet, there had always been little examples of flowers decorated in a single row of petals, so that they took up the room at all and got in no one's way. They would appear one morning in the grass and would fade by nightfall. But this one had grown from a seed brought from who knows where, and the little prince and any others, it might be some kind of new baobab. And it was a sprout soon, stopped growing, and then began to show signs of blossoming. The little prince, who had watched the development of the enormous bud, realized it was some sort of miraculous apparition of the emerged from it. And the flower continued the beauty preparations in the shelter of a green chamber, selecting her colors with the greatest care and dressing quite deliberately, adjusting her petals one by one. So she had no desire to emerge all rumpled like the poppies. She wished to appear only in the full radiance of her beauty. Oh yes, this is quite vain. In her serious adornment she lasted days and days, and one morning, precisely at sunrise, she showed herself. And after that laboring so painstakingly, she yawned and said,
I'm hardly awake. Forgive me. I'm all untidy.
But the little prince couldn't contain his admiration.
How lovely you are. Aren't I?
The flower answered sweetly.
And I was born the same time as the sun.
The little prince realized that she wasn't way too modest, but she was so dazzling.
I believe it is breakfast time, she had soon added. Would you be so kind as to tend to me?
And the little prince, utterly abashed, had gone to look at the watering can, served the flower. She had soon begun tormenting him with a rather touched vanity. One day, for instance, alluding to her thorn, she remarked to the little prince,
I am ready for tigers, and with all their claws. There are no tigers on my planet, the little prince had objected. And besides, tigers don't eat weeds. I am not a weed, the flower sweetly replied. Forgive me. I am not afraid of tigers, but I have an odor of drafts. You happen to have a screen. A odor of drafts? That's not a good sign for a plant, the little prince had observed. How complicated a flower is.
And after dark you'll put me
under a glass.
Wait.
And how cold it is where you live. Quite uncomfortable. Where I come from.
But she suddenly broke off. She had come here as a seed. She couldn't have known anything in other worlds. She made it by having let herself be caught on the verge of so naive of a lie. She coughed 2 or 3 times in order to put the little prince in the wrong.
That screen? I was going to look for one, but you were speaking to me.
Then she made herself cough again, in order to inflict a twinge of remorse on him all the same. So the little prince, despite all the goodwill of his love, had soon come to mistrust her. She had taken seriously certain inconsequential remarks and had grown very unhappy. I shouldn't have listened to her, he confided to me one day. You must never listen to flowers. You must look at them and smell them. Mine perfumed my planet. But I don't know how to enjoy that. The business about tiger claws, instead of annoying me, ought to have moved me. Then he confided further.
In those days, I didn't understand anything. I should have judged her according to her actions, not her words. She perfumed my planet and lit it up with my life. I should never have run away. I'd have realized tenderness underlying her silly pretensions. Flowers are so contradictory, but I was too young to know how to love her.
Chapter 9. In order to make his escape, I believe he took advantage of the migration of the wild birds. In the morning of his departure, he put his planet in order. He carefully raked out the active volcanoes. The little prince possessed 2 active volcanoes, which are very convenient for warming his breakfast. He also possessed 1 extinct volcano, but as he said, you never know. You never know. So he raked out an extinct volcano too. If they were properly raked out, volcanoes burn gently and regularly without eruptions. Volcanic eruptions are like fires in the chimney. Of course, on our Earth, we are much too small to rake out our volcanoes. That is why they cause so much trouble. The little prince also uprooted, a little sadly, the last baobab shoots he had believed had never be coming back, but as all these familiar tasks seemed very sweet to him the last morning, then he watered the flower one last time. He put her under a glass. He felt like crying. "Goodbye," he said to the flower, but she did not answer him. "Goodbye," he repeated. The flower coughed, but it was because she had a cold. I've been silly," he told him at last. "I ask your forgiveness. Try to be happy." As he was surprised that there were no reapproaches, he stood there, quite bewildered, holding the glass spell in midair. He failed to understand the calm sweetness. "Of course I love you," the flower told him. "It was my fault, you never know. It doesn't matter. But you were as silly as I was. Try to be happy. Put the glass thing down. I don't want it anymore." "But the wind, my cold isn't that bad. The night air would do me good. I'm a flower." "But the animals, I need to put up with 2 or 3 caterpillars if I want to grow. If I want to know the butterflies. Apparently they're very beautiful. Otherwise, who will visit me? You'll be far away. As for the big animals, I'm not afraid of them. I have my own claws." She naively showed off her 4 thorns. Then she added, "Don't hang around like this. It's irritating. You've made up your mind to leave. Now go." When she didn't want to see her crying, she was such a proud flower. Chapter 10. He happened to be in the vicinity of asteroid 325, 326, 327, 328, 329, and 330. So he began by visiting them, and to keep himself busy and to learn something. The first one was inhabited by a king, wearing a purple and entrim as he was sitting on the simple yet majestic throne. "Ah, here's a subject," the king exclaimed when he caught sight of the little prince. And the little prince wondered, how can he know who I am if he's never seen me before? He didn't realize that for kings, the world is extremely simplified. All men are subjects. "Approach the throne so I can get a better look at you," said the king, very proud of being king for someone at last. The little prince looked around for the place to sit down, but the planet was covered by a magnificent cloak, so he remained standing. And since he was tired, he yawned. "It is a violation of etiquette to yawn in the king's presence," the monarch told him. "I forbid you to do so." "I can't help it," answered the little prince, quite embarrassed. "I made a long journey. I haven't had much any sleep." "Then I command you to yawn," said the king. "I haven't seen anyone yawn for years. For me, yawns are courtesy. Curiosity. Come on, yawn again. It is an order." "Then intimidate thee. I can't do it now," said the little prince, blushing deeply. Well, the king replied, "Then I command you to yawn sometimes and sometimes too," he said, sputtering a little. He seemed annoyed, for the king insisted that his authority be universally respected. He would tolerate no disobedience, being an absolute monarch, but since he was a kindly man, all his commands were reasonable. "If I were to command," he would often say, "if I were to command a general to turn into a seagull, and if the general did not obey, that would be the general's fault. It wouldn't be the general's fault. It would be mine." May I sit down?" the little prince timidly inquired. "I command you to sit down," the king replied, majestically gathering up the fold of his arimi robe. But the little princess was wondering. The planet was tiny. Over what king really reign? "Sire," he ventured, "excuse me for asking." "I command you to ask," the king hastened to say. "Sire, over what do you reign?" "Over everything," the king answered with a great simplicity. "Over everything?" With a discreet gesture, the king pointed to the planets, to the other planets, and to the stars. "Over all that?" asked the little prince. "Over all that," the king answered. For not only was he an absolute monarch, but the universal monarch as well.
And the stars obey you?
Of course, the king replied. They obey immediately. I tolerate no insubordination. Such power amazed the little prince, and if he had wielded it himself, he could have watched not 44, but 72, or even 100, even 200 sunsets of the same day, not ever having to move his chair. And since he was feeling rather sad on account of remembering his own little planet, which he had forsaken, he ventured to ask a favor of the king.
I'd like to see the sunset. Do me a favor, your majesty. Command the sun to set.
If I command the general to fly, then one flower to the next like a butterfly, or to write a tragedy, or to turn into a seagull, and if the general did not carry out my command, which is of us would be the wrong, the general or me?
You would be, said the little prince quite firmly.
Exactly. One must command from each what one can perform, the king went on. Authority is based first upon reason. If you command your subjects to jump in the ocean, there will be a revolution. I am entitled to command obedience because my orders are reasonable.
And my sunset, insisted the little prince, who had never let go of the question once he had asked it.
You shall have your sunset. I shall command it. But I shall wait, according to my science of government, until conditions are favorable.
And then will that be? Inquired the little prince.
Well, replied the king, first consulting a large calendar. Well, that would be that'll be tonight, around 7:40, and you'll see how I will obeyed.
The little prince yawned. He was regretting his lost sunset, and besides, he was already growing a little bored. I have nothing further to do, he told the king. I'm going to be on my way.
Do not leave, answered the king, who was so proud of having a subject. Do not leave. I shall make you my minister.
A minister of what?
Of justice.
But there's no one here to judge.
You never know, the king told him. I have not yet explored the whole of my realm. I am very old. I have no room for a carriage. It wears me to rock.
Oh, but I've already seen it for myself, said the little prince, leaning forward to glance one more time at the other side of the planet. There's no one over there either.
Then you shall pass judgment on yourself, the king answered. That is the hardest thing of all. It is much harder to judge yourself than to judge others. If you succeed in judging yourself, it is because you are truly a wise man.
But I can judge myself anywhere, said the little prince. I don't need to live here.
Well, the king said. I have good reason to believe that there's an old rat living somewhere on my planet. I hear him at night. You can judge that old rat. From time to time you will condemn him to death. That way his life will depend on your justice. Not you'll pardon him each time for economy's sake. There's only one rat.
I don't like condemning anyone to death, the little prince said, and now I think I'll be on my way.
No, said the king.
The little prince, having completed his preparations, had no desire to aggrieve the old monarch. If your majesty desires to promptly obey, he will give me a reasonable command. He might command me, for instance, to leave before his minute was up. It seems to me the conditions are favorable. The king, having made no answer, the little prince hesitated at first, and then, with a sigh, took his leave.
I'll make you my ambassador, the king said hastily, shouted after him. He had a great air of authority.
Grown-ups are so strange, the little prince said to himself as he went on his way.
Chapter 11. The second planet was inhabited by a very vain man.
A visit from an admirer, he exclaimed when he caught sight of the little prince, still at some distance to a vain man. Other people are admirers.
Hello, said the little prince. That's a funny hat you're wearing.
It's for answering acclamations, the very vain man replied. Unfortunately, no one ever comes this way.
Is that so? Said the little prince,
who did not understand what the vain man was talking about. Clap your hands, directed the man. The little prince clapped his hands, and the vain man tipped his hat in modest acknowledgement. This was more entertaining than he visited the king. The little prince had to himself as he continued clapping. The very vain man continued tipping his hat in acknowledgement. After 5 minutes of this exercise, the little prince tired of the game's monotony.
And what makes the hat fall off?
He asked. But the vain man did not hear him. Vain men never hear anything but praise. Do you really admire me a great deal? He asked the little prince.
What does that mean? Admire.
To admire means to acknowledge that I am the most handsomest, best dressed, and richest and the intelligent man on the planet.
But you're the only man on your planet.
Do me a favor. Admire me all the same.
I admire you, said the little prince,
with a little shrug of the shoulders. But But what is there about admiration that interests you so much? The little prince went on to say. Grown-ups are certainly very strange, he said to himself, as he continued on his journey. Chapter 12. The next planet was inhabited by a drunkard. His visit was a very brief one, but it plunged the little prince into a deep depression. "What are you doing here?" He asked, "What are you doing here?" He asked the drunkard, whom he sunk into silence before a collection of empty bottles and full ones. "Drinking," replied the drunkard with a gloomy expression. "Why are you drinking?" the little prince asked. "To forget," replied the drunkard. "To forget what?" inquired the little prince, who was already feeling sorry for him. "To forget what I'm ashamed," confessed the drunkard, hanging from his head. "What are you ashamed of?" inquired the little prince, who wanted to help. "Of drinking," concluded the drunkard, withdrawing into silence for good, and the little prince went on his way, puzzled. "Grown-ups are certainly very, very strange," he said to himself, as he continued on his journey. The fourth planet belonged to a businessman. This person was so busy that he hadn't even raised his head when the little prince arrived. "Hello," said the little prince. "Your cigarette's gone out."
Tooth. 3 and 2 make 5. 5 and 7, 12. 12 and 3, 15. Hello. 15 and 7, 22. 22 and 6, 28. No time to light it again. 26 and 5, 31. Phew. That amounts to 501,622,731. 500 million. What? You're still here? 501 million. I don't remember. I have so much work to do. I'm a serious man. I can't be bothered with rivals. 2 and 5, 7. 501 million. What? Repeated the little prince, who had never in his life let go of the question once he was asked it. The businessman raised his head. "For the 54 years I've inhabited this planet, I've been interrupted only 3 times. The first time was 22 years ago when I was interrupted by a beetle that had fallen onto my desk. From God knows where, I made a terrible noise and I made 4 mistakes in my calculations. The second time was 11 years ago when I was interrupted by a fit rheumatism. I didn't know enough exercise. I haven't had time to take strolls. I'm a serious person. The third time is right now. Where was I? 501 million. Million what?" The businessman realized that he had no hope of being left in peace. Of those little things you sometimes see in the sky. Flies? No, the little shiny things. Bees? No, the little golden things that make lazy people daydream. Now, I'm a serious person. I have no time for daydreaming. Ah, you mean stars. Yeah. Yes, that's it, stars. And what do you do with 500 million stars? 501,622,731. I'm a serious person, and I'm accurate. And what do you do with those stars? What do I do with them? Yes, nothing. I own them. You own the stars? Yes. But I've already seen the king who... Kings don't own. They reign over. It's quite different. And what does owning the stars do you? It does me a good of being rich. And what does it do you to be rich? It lets me buy other stars if somebody discovers them. The little prince said to himself, "This man argues like the drunkard." Nevertheless, he asked more questions. "How can someone own the stars? To whom they belong?" retorted the businessman grumpily. "I don't know. To nobody? Then they belong to me, because I thought of it first. And that's all it takes? Of course. When you find a diamond that belongs to nobody in particular, then it's yours. When you find an island that belongs to nobody in particular, it's yours. When you're the first person to have an idea, you patent it, and it's yours. Now I own the stars, since no one before me ever thought of owning them." "That's true enough," the little prince said. "And what do you do with them?" "I manage them. I count them. Then count them again," the businessman said. "It's difficult work, but I'm a serious person." The little prince was still not satisfied. "If I own a scarf, I can tie it around my neck and take it away. If I own a flower, I can pick it and take it away. But you can't pick the stars?" "No, but I can put them in a bank." "What does that even mean?" "That means I write a number of the stars on a slip of paper, then I lock that slip of paper in a drawer. And that's all? That's enough." "That's amusing," thought the little prince, "and even poetic, but not very serious." The little prince had very different ideas about serious things from those who like grown-ups. "I own a flower myself," he continued, "which I water every day, and I own 3 volcanoes, which I rake every week. And then I rake the extinct one. You never know. It's some of those volcanoes. It's useful to my flower that I own them, but you're not useful to the stars." The businessman opened his mouth, but nothing had to say in reply, and the little prince went on his way. "Grown-ups are certainly quite extraordinary," was all he said to himself, and he continued his journey. Chapter 14. The 5th planet was very strange. It was smallest of all, and there was enough room for a sleep lamp and a little lighter.
The little prince couldn't quite understand the use of the street lamp. A lamplighter could be up in the sky on a planet without many people and not a single house. However, he said to himself, it's quite possible this man is absurd, and less absurd than the thing. He's a very vain man, the businessman, and the drunkard. At least his work has some meaning, and then the lights of the lamp, and it has been bringing one more star to life, or one more flower. Then he puts out his lamp, and sends the flower or the star to sleep, which is a fine occupation, and therefore truly useful. Then the little prince reached his planet. He greeted the lamplighter respectfully.
Good morning. Why have you just put out your lamp?
Orders, the lamplighter answered. Good morning.
What orders are those?
To put out my street lamp. Good evening. And he lit his lamp again.
But why have you just lit your lamp again?
Orders.
I don't understand, the little prince said.
There's nothing to understand, said the lamplighter.
Orders are orders.
Orders are orders. Good morning. Then he put out his lamp. Then he wiped his forehead with a red-cheeked handkerchief. It's a terrible job I have, or you should be reasonable enough. I put the lamp out mornings and lit after dark. I had the rest of the day for my own affairs and the rest of the night for sleeping.
And since your orders have changed...
Orders haven't changed, the lamplighter said. That's just the trouble. Year by year, the planet is turning faster and faster, and orders haven't changed.
Which means?
Which means that now the planet revolves once a minute. I don't have an instant's rest. I light my lamp and turn it once every minute.
That's funny. Your days are 1 minute long?
It's not funny at all, the lamplighter said. You and I have already been talking to each other for a month.
A month?
Yes, 30 minutes, 30 days. Good evening. And he lit his lamp. The little prince watched him, and growing fonder of the lamplighter, who was faithful to orders, he remembered of certain sunsets that he himself used to follow in other days. Merely by shifting his chair, he wanted to help his friend.
You know, I could show you a way to take the rest whenever you want to.
I always want to rest, the lamplighter said, for it was possible to be faithful and lazy at the same time. The little prince continued.
Your planet is so small that you can walk around it 3 strides. All you have to do is walk more slowly. All you have to be in the sun. Then, when you want to take your rest, you just walk. And the day will last as long as you want it to.
What does that do me, the lamplighter said.
When the one thing in life
When the one thing I want to do in life is sleep.
Then you're out of luck, the little prince said.
I am, said the lamplighter. Good morning. And they'll put the lamp out. Now that man, the little prince said to himself as he continued his journey, that man would be despised by all the others, by the king, by a very vain man, by the drunkard, by the businessman. Yet, he's the only one who doesn't strike me as ridiculous. Perhaps it's because he's thinking of something besides himself. He heaved a sigh of regret and said to himself again, that man is the only one I might have made a friend. But this planet is really too small, and there's not room for 2. And thus the little prince dared not admit that he was not regretted leaving the planet because it was blessed for 1,440 sunsets every 24 hours. Chapter 15. The 6th planet was 10 times bigger than the last. It was inhabited by an old gentleman who wrote enormous books. Ah, here comes an explorer, he exclaimed when he caught sight of the little prince, who was feeling a little winded and sat down on the desk. He had already traveled so much and so far. Where do you come from? The old gentleman asked him.
What's that big book? Asked the little prince.
What do you do?
What do you do with it?
I'm a geographer, the old gentleman answered.
And what's a geographer?
A scholar who knows where the seas are, and the rivers, the cities, and the mountains, and the desert.
That's very interesting, the little prince said.
At last is someone who has a real profession. And he gazed around the geographer's planet. He had never seen a planet so majestic.
Your planet is very beautiful, he said. Does it have any oceans?
I couldn't say, said the geographer.
Oh, the little prince was disappointed. And mountains?
I couldn't say, said the geographer.
And cities and rivers and deserts?
I couldn't tell you that either, the geographer said.
But you're a geographer.
That's right, said the geographer. But I'm not an explorer. There's not one explorer in my planet. The geographer doesn't go out to describe cities, rivers, mountains, seas, oceans, and deserts. A geographer is too important to go wandering about. He never leaves his study, but he receives the explorers here. He mentions them and writes down what they remember. And if the memories of one of the explorers seems interesting to him, then the geographer conducts an inquiry into the explorer's moral character.
Why is that?
Because an explorer who holds lies and causes disasters in geography books, as would an explorer who drank too much.
Why is that? The little prince asked again.
Because drunkards see double, and the geographer will write down 2 mountains where there was only 1.
I know someone, said the little prince, who would be a bad explorer.
Possibly. Well, when there's an explorer of moral character, seems to be a good one, an investigation is made into his discovery.
By going to see it?
No, that would be too complicated. But the explorers required to furnish proofs. For instance, if he claims to discover a large mountain, he is required to bring back large stones from it.
The geographer suddenly grew excited.
But you come from far away. You're an explorer. You must describe your planet for me.
And the geographer, having opened his logbook, sharpened his pencil, explorers' reports are first recorded in the pencil. Ink is used after proofs have been furnished.
Well, said
the geographer expectantly.
Oh, where I live, said the little prince, it's not very interesting. It's so small. I have 3 volcanoes, 2 active and 1 extinct. But you never know.
You never know, said the geographer.
I also have a flower.
Why don't record flowers, the geographer said.
Why not? It's the prettiest thing.
Because flowers are too ephemeral.
What does ephemeral mean?
Geographies, said the geographer, are the finest books of all. They never go out of fashion. It's extremely rare for a mountain to change position. It's extremely rare for an ocean to be drained of its water. We write eternal things.
But extinct volcanoes can come back to life, the little prince interrupted. Does that mean ephemeral? What does ephemeral mean?
Whether volcanoes are extinct or active comes from the same thing for us, said the geographer. For us, what counts as a mountain, that doesn't change.
What does ephemeral mean? Repeated the little prince, who had never in all his life let go of the question once he had asked it.
It means which is threatened by immediate disappearance.
What, is my flower threatened by immediate disappearance?
Of course.
My flower is ephemeral, the little prince said to himself, as he was only 4 thorns which would offend herself against the world, and I have left her all alone where I live. And that was the first impulse of regret. Then he plucked up his courage again. Where would you advise me to visit?
He asked.
The planet Earth, the geographer answered. It was a good reputation.
And the little prince went on his way, thinking about his flower. Chapter 16. The 7th planet, then, was the Earth. The Earth is not just another planet. It contains 111 kings, including, of course, the African kings, 7,000 geographers, 909,000 businessmen, 7.5 million drunkards, 311 million vain men, in other words, and about 2 billion grown-ups. To give you a notion of the Earth's dimensions, I can tell you that before the invention of electricity, it was necessary to maintain over a whole of the 6 continents a veritable army of 462,511 lamplighters. Seen from one distance, is made a splendid effect. The movements of his army were ordered like those of a ballet. Thus came the turn of the lamplighters of New Zealand and Australia. Then these, having lit their street lamps, would go home to sleep. Then it would be the turn to lamplighters of China and Siberia to form their steps in the lamplighters' ballet, and they would vanish into wings. And then came the turn of the lamplighters of Russia and India, then those of Africa and Europe, and then those of South America and North America, and they never missed their cues and appearances on stage and awe-inspiring. Only the lamplighter of the single street lamp was the North Pole and the colleague, and the single street lamp at the South Pole led carefree, idle lives. They worked twice a year. Chapter 16. 17, sorry. Chapter 17. Trying to be witty leads to lying, more or less. What I just told you about the lamplighters isn't completely true, and I risk giving a false idea of our planet to those who don't know it. Men occupy very little space on Earth. If the 2 billion inhabitants of the globe were to stand close together, that might, for someone, big public event, they would only fit into a city block that was 20 miles long and 20 miles wide. You could crowd all of humanity into the smallest Pacific islet. Grown-ups, of course, won't believe you. They're convinced that they take up more room. They consider themselves as important as baobabs. So, you should advise them to make their own calculations. They love numbers, and they'll enjoy it. And don't waste your time on this extra task. It's unnecessary. Trust me. So once we reached Earth, the little prince was quite surprised not to see anyone. He was beginning to fear he had come to the wrong planet, when the moon color looped uncoiled in the sand.
Good evening, the little prince said, just in case.
Good evening.
Good evening, said the snake. What planet have I landed on? Asked the little prince.
On the planet Earth in Africa,
the snake replied.
Ah, and are there no people on Earth?
It is a desert here. There are no people in the desert. Earth is very big, said the snake.
The little prince sat down on the rock and looked up in the sky.
I wonder, he said, if the stars are lit up, there's each of us can find a zone someday. Look at my planet. It's just overhead, but so far away.
It's lovely, the snake said. What have you come to Earth for?
I'm having difficulties with a flower, the little prince said.
Ah, said the snake.
And they were both silent.
Where are the people?
The little prince finally resumed the conversation.
It's a little lonely in the desert.
It's also lonely with people, said the snake.
The little prince looked at the snake for a long time.
You're a funny creature, he said at last. No thicker than a finger.
But I'm more powerful than a king's finger, the snake said. The little prince smiled. You're not very powerful. You don't even have feet. You couldn't travel very far. I can take you further than a ship, the snake said. He coiled around the little prince's ankle like a golden bracelet. Anyone I touch, I send back to the land from which he came, the snake went on. But you're innocent. You come from a star. The little prince made no reply. I feel sorry for you being so weak on this granite earth. I feel so sorry for you being so weak on this planet Earth, said the snake. I can help you someday if you grow to homesick of your planet. I can... Oh, I understand just what you mean, said the little prince. But why do you always speak in riddles? I solved them all, said the snake, and they were both silent. Chapter 18. The little prince crossed the desert and encountered only one flower, a flower with 3 petals, a flower of no consequence. Good morning, said the prince.
Good morning, said the flower.
Where are the people? The little prince inquired politely. The flower had one day seen a caravan passing.
People, there are 6 or 7 of them, I believe, in existence. I caught sight of them years ago, but never know where to find them. The wind blows them away. They have no roots, which hampers them a good deal.
Goodbye, said the little prince.
Goodbye, said the flower.
Chapter 19. The little prince climbed a high mountain, the only mountains he had ever known since the 3 volcanoes which came up to his knee, and he used the extinct volcanoes as a footstool. From the mountain as high as this one, he said to himself, I'll get a view of the whole planet and the people on it. But he saw nothing but rocky peaks as sharp as needles. Hello, he said, just in case. Hello, 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 the echo answered. Who are you? Said the little prince. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? The echo answered. Let's be friends. I'm lonely, he said. I'm lonely, I'm lonely, I'm lonely, the echo answered. What a particular planet, he thought. That's all dry and sharp and hard, and people have no imagination. They repeat whatever you say to them. Where I live, I had a flower. She always spoke first. Chapter 20. But it so happened that the little prince, having walked a long time through the sand and rocks and snow, finally discovered a road. And all roads go to where there are people. Good morning, he said, as the blossoming rose garden. Good morning, said the roses. The little prince gazed at them. All of them looked like this flower. Who are you? He asked, astounded. We're roses, the roses said. Ah, said the little prince. He felt very happy. His flower had told him he was the only one of her kind in the whole universe, and there were 5,000 of them, just all alike, and just one guarded. She would be very annoyed, he said to himself. If she saw this, she would cough terribly and pretend to be dying, to avoid being laughed at, and then pretend to be nursing her. Otherwise, she'd really let herself die in order humiliately. And then, he said to himself, I thought I was rich because I had just one flower, and I was the ordinary rose, and that and my 3 volcanoes, which come up to my knee, one of which may be permanently extinct. It doesn't make me much of a prince. And he laid down in the grass and wept. Chapter 21. It was then that the fox appeared.
Good morning, said the fox.
Good morning, the little prince answered politely, though when he turned around he saw nothing. I'm here, the voice said, under the apple tree. Who are you? The little prince asked. You're very pretty.
I'm a fox, the fox said.
Come and play with me, the little prince proposed. I'm feeling so sad.
I can't play with you, the fox said. I am not tamed.
Ah, excuse me, said the little prince, but upon reflection he added, what does tamed mean?
You're not from around here, the fox said. What are you looking for?
I'm looking for people, the little prince said. What does tamed mean?
People, said the fox, have guns and they hunt. It's quite troublesome. They also raise chickens. That's the only interesting thing about them. Are you looking for chickens?
No, said the little prince. I'm looking for friends. What does tamed mean?
It's something that's been too often neglected. It means to create ties.
To create ties?
That's right, the fox said. For me, you're only a little boy, just like the 100,000 other little boys, and I have no need of you, and you have no need of me either. For you, I am only a fox like the 100,000 other foxes. But if you tame me, we'll need each other. You'll be the only boy in the world for me. I'll be the only fox in the world for you.
I'm beginning to understand, the little prince said. There's a flower. I think she's tamed me.
Possibly, the fox said. On Earth, one sees all kinds of things.
Oh, this isn't on Earth, the little prince said. The fox seemed quite intrigued.
On another planet?
Yes.
Are there hunters on that planet?
No.
Now that's interesting. And chickens? No. Nothing's perfect, sighed the fox. But he returned to his idea. My life is monotonous. I hunt chickens. People hunt me. All chickens are just alike, and all men are just alike. I'm so rather bored. But if you tame me, my life will be filled with sunshine. I know the sound of footsteps that will be different from all the rest. Other footsteps send me back underground. Yours will call me out to burrow like music. And then, look! You see the wheat fields over there? I don't eat bread. For me, wheat is of no use whatever. Wheat fields say nothing to me, which is sad. But you have hair the color of gold, so it'll be wonderful once you've tamed me. The wheat, which is golden, will remind me of you, and I'll love the sound of the wind in the wheat. The fox fell silent and stared at the little prince for a long while. Please, tame me, he said.
I'd like to, the little prince replied, but I haven't much time. I have friends to find and so many things to learn.
The only things you learn are the things you tame, said the fox. People haven't time to learn anything. They buy things ready-made in stores. But since there are no stores where you could buy friends, people no longer have friends. If you want a friend, tame me.
What do I have to do? Said the little prince.
You have to be very patient, the fox answered. First you'll sit down a little ways from me over there in the grass. I'll watch you out of the corner of my eye and you won't say anything. Language is the source of misunderstandings. But day by day you'll be able to sit a little closer. The next day the little prince returned.
It would have been better to return at the same...
It would have been better to return at the same time, the fox said. For instance, if you come at 4 in the afternoon, I'll begin to be happy by 3. The closer it gets to 4, the happier I'll feel. By 4, I'll be all excited and worried. I'll discover what it costs to be happy. But if you come at any old time, I'll never know when I should prepare my heart. There must be rights.
What's a right? Said the little prince.
That's another thing that's been too often neglected, said the fox. It's the fact that one day is different from another day. It's 1 hour from the other hours. My hunters, for example, have a right. They dance in the village girls on Thursday, so Thursday's a wonderful day. I could take a stroll all the way to the vineyards. If the hunters danced whenever they chose, the days would just be alike, and I would have no holiday at all.
That was how the little prince tamed the fox, and when the time to leave was near,
the fox said, I shall weep.
It's your own fault, the little prince said. I never wanted to do you any harm, but I insisted that I tame you.
Yes, of course, the fox said.
But you're going to weep, said the little prince.
Yes, of course, the fox said.
Then you should get nothing out of it.
I get something, the fox said, because of the color of the wheat. Then he added, go look at the roses. Again, you'll understand that yours is the only rose in the world. Then come back to say goodbye, and I'll make you a gift of a secret.
The little prince went to look at the roses again. You're not at all like my rose. You're nothing at all yet, he told them. No one has tamed you. No one has tamed you, and you haven't tamed anyone. You're the way my fox was. He was just a fox and 100,000 others. But I've made him my friend, and I was the only fox in the world. And all roses are humbled.
And the roses were humbled.
You're lovely, but you're empty, he went on. One couldn't die for you. Of course, an ordinary passerby would think that my rose looked just like you. But my rose, all on her own, is more important than all of you together. Since she's the one I've watered, since she's the one I put under glass, since she's the one I've sheltered behind a screen, since she's the one whom I killed the caterpillars, except 2 or 3 for butterflies, since she's the one I listened to when she complained, and when she boasted, or even sometimes when she had nothing at all, she was my rose. And then went back to the fox. Goodbye, said the fox.
Goodbye, said the fox. Here's my secret. It's quite simple. One sees clearly only with the heart. Anything essential is invisible to the eyes.
Anything essential is visible to the eyes, the little prince repeated in order to remember.
It's the time you spent on your rose that makes your rose so important.
It's the time I spent on my rose, the little prince repeated in order to remember.
People have forgotten this truth, the fox said, but you mustn't forget. You become responsible forever that you tamed, responsible for your rose.
I'm responsible for my rose, the little prince repeated in order to remember. Good morning,
Chapter 22.
Good morning, said the little prince.
Good morning, said the railway switchman.
What has he got there? Asked the little prince.
I sort the travelers into bundles of 1,000, the switchman said. I dispatch the trains that carry 'em, sometimes with the right and sometimes with the left.
And the bright little express train, roaring like thunder, shook the switchman's cabin.
What a hurry there!
What a hurry they're in, said the little prince. What are they looking for?
Not even the engineer on the locomotive knows, the switchman said. Another brightly lit express train thundered by in the opposite direction.
Are they coming back already? Asked the little prince.
It's not the same ones, the switchman said. It's an exchange.
They weren't satisfied where they were? Asked the little prince.
No one's ever satisfied where he is, the switchman said.
And the third brightly lit express train thundered past. Are they chasing the first travelers? Asked the little prince.
They're not chasing anything, the switchman said.
They're sleeping in there, or else they're yawning. Only the children are pressing their noses against the window panes. Only the children know what they're looking for, said the little prince. They spend all their time with a rag doll, and sometimes it's very important. It's taken away from them, they cry.
They're lucky, the switchman said.
Chapter 23. Good morning. Good morning, said the little prince.
Good morning, said the sales clerk.
This was the sales clerk who sold pills invented to quench thirst. Swallow one a week and you'll no longer feel the need to drink. Why do you sell these pills?
They save so much time, the sales clerk said. Experts have calculated that you could shave 53 minutes a week.
And what do you do with those 53 minutes?
Whatever you like.
If I had 53 minutes to spend as I liked, the little prince said to himself, I'd walk very slowly toward a water fountain.
Chapter 14. It was now the 8th day since my crash landing in the desert, and I'd listened to the story about the sales clerk as I was drinking the last drop of my water supply.
I said
to the little prince, your memories are very pleasant, but I haven't yet prepared my plane. I have nothing left to drink, and I, too, would be glad to walk very slowly toward the water fountain.
My friend the fox told me.
Little fellow, this has nothing to do with the fox.
Why?
Because we're going to die of thirst. The little prince didn't follow my reasoning and answered me,
It's good to have had a friend even if you're going to die. Myself, I'm very glad to have that fox for a friend.
He doesn't realize the danger. I said to myself, he's never hungry or thirsty. A little sunlight is enough for him. But the little prince looked at me as though he answered my thought.
I'm thirsty too. Let's find a well.
I made an exasperated gesture. It was absurd looking for a well at random in the vastness of the desert. But even so, we started walking. When he walked for several hours in silence, night fell, and stars began to appear. I noticed them in a dream, so being somewhat feverish on account of my thirst. The little prince's words danced in my memory.
So you're thirsty
too, I asked. But he didn't answer my question. He merely said to me,
Water canal should be good for the heart.
I didn't understand his answer, but I had said nothing. I knew by this time that it was no questioning him. He was tired. He sat down. I sat down next to him. And after the silence, he spoke again.
The stars are beautiful because of the flower you don't see.
I answered, yes, of course. And without speaking another word, I stared into the ridges of the sand in the moonlight.
The desert is beautiful, the little prince added.
And this was true, and I always loved the desert. You sit down on the sand dune and you see nothing, you hear nothing, and yet something shines, something sings in that silence.
That makes the desert beautiful. What makes the desert beautiful? The little prince said. Is that it hides a well somewhere?
I was surprised by suddenly understanding what the mysterious radiance of the sands. When I was a little boy, I lived in an old house, and there was a legend that the treasure was buried in it somewhere. Of course, no one was ever able to find the treasure, perhaps no one even searched. But I cast a spell over the whole house, but the house was hid a secret in the depths of its heart. Yes, I said to the little prince, whether it's a house or the stars or the desert, what makes them beautiful is invisible.
I'm glad, he said. You agree with my fox.
As the little prince was falling asleep, I picked him up in my arms and started walking again. I was moved. It was as if I was carrying a fragile treasure. It barely seemed to me that there's nothing more fragile on earth. By the light of the moon, I gazed at the pale forehead, those who closed eyes, and those locks of hair trembling in the wind. And I said to myself, what I'm looking at is only a shell. What is most important is invisible. At this lips parted of the half-smile, he said to himself again, what moves me so deeply is this sleeping little prince's loyalty to a flower, the image of the rose shining within him deep like a flame within a lamp, and even while he was asleep. And I realized that he was even more fragile than I thought. Lamps must be protected. A gust of wind can blow them out. And talking on like that, I found a well at daybreak. Chapter 25. The little prince said,
People start out on the express trains. They no longer know what they're looking for. Then they all get excited and rush around in circles. And he added, It's not worth the trouble.
The well he had come to was not like the wells of the Sahara. The wells of the Sahara were no more than holes dug in the sand. This one looked more like a village well, but there was no village here, and I thought I was dreaming. It's strange, I said to the little prince. Everything is ready, the pulley, the bucket, and the rope. He laughed, cast the rope, and the pulley working. And the pulley groaned away in old weather-vane groans, and the wind was asleep in a long time.
Hear that? Said the prince. We've awakened this well, and it's singing.
I didn't want him to tire himself out. Let me do it, I said to him. It's too heavy for you. Slowly, I hoisted the bucket, the edge of the well, to set it down with great care. The song of the pulley continued in my ears, and I saw the sun glisten on the still trembling water.
I'm thirsty for that water, said the little prince. Let me drink some.
And I understood that he was looking for. I raised the bucket to his lips. He drank. He closed his eyes. It was sweet as a feast. That water was more than merely a drink. It was born of our walk beneath the stars, of a song of the pulley and the effort of my arms. It did the heart like a present. And when I was a little boy, the Christmas tree lights and the music of midnight mass, the tendernesses of people's smiles made up in the same way the whole radiance of the Christmas present I received.
People where you live, the little prince said, grow 5,000 roses in one garden, yet they don't find what they're looking for.
They don't find it, I answered.
And yet they're looking for what could be found in a single rose or a little water.
Of course, I answered. And the little prince added,
but eyes are blind. You have to look with the heart.
I have drunk the water. I could breathe easy now. The sand at the daybreak is honey-colored, and the color is making me happy, too. Why, then, did I feel so sad?
You must keep your promise, said the little prince, sitting up again beside me.
What promise?
You know, a muzzle for my sheep. I'm responsible for this flower.
I took a prong out of my pocket. The little prince glanced at them and laughed as he did.
Your baobabs look more like cabbages.
Oh, I've been so proud of the baobabs.
Your fotch has ears. It looks more like horns, and they're so long.
And he laughed again. You're being very unfair, my little prince, he said. I never knew how to draw anything but boas from the side and boas from the outside.
Oh, that'll be all right, he said. Children understand.
So then I drew a muzzle, and a heavy heart I handed it to him. You've made plans I don't know about, but he didn't answer. He said,
you know my fall to earth? Tomorrow will be the first anniversary.
And then after silence he continued,
I landed very near here, and then he blushed again.
And once again, without understanding why, I felt a strange grief. However, question occurred to me. Then, it wasn't by accident that the morning I met you 8 days ago, you're walking that way all alone 1,000 miles from any inhabited region. You were returning to the place you fell to earth. The little prince blushed again. Then I added hesitantly, perhaps on account of the anniversary. The little prince blushed once more and never answered questions. And then someone blushes, he doesn't mean yes. I said to the little prince, I'm afraid, but he answered,
you must get to work now. You must get back to your engine. I'll wait here. Come back tomorrow night.
But if I wasn't reassured, I remembered the fox. You risk tears and let yourself be tamed. Chapter 26. Beside the well, there was a ruin, an old stone wall. When I came back from my work on the next evening, I caught sight of the little prince in the distance. He was sitting on top of the wall, legs dangling as I heard him talking.
Don't you remember? He was saying. This isn't exactly the place.
Another voice must have answered him then, for he replied,
oh yes, it's right there. It just wasn't the place.
I continued walking toward the wall. I still could neither see nor hear anyone, yet the little prince answered again.
Of course, you'll see where my tracks begin in the sand, but wait for me there. I'll be there tonight.
I was 20 yards from the wall and still saw no one, and the little prince said after silence, Your poison is good. You sure it won't make me suffer long? I stopped short in my heart pounding, but I still don't understand.
Now go away, the little prince said. I want to get down from here.
And then I looked down toward the foot of the wall and gave it a great start. There, coiled in front of the little prince, were yellow snakes that would kill you in 30 seconds. As I dug into the pocket for my revolver, I stepped back. With the noise I made, the snake followed over the sand, trickling fountain, and even hurrying, slipped away between the stones with a faint metallic sound. I reached for the wall just in time to catch my little prince in my arms, his face white as snow. What's going on here? You're talking to snakes now? I had loosened a yellow scarf that he always wore. I had moistened his temples and made him drink some water, and now I didn't dare ask him anything more. He gazed at me in serious expression and put his arms around my neck. He felt his heart beating like dying birds. Then it was shot. When it's been shot, he said to me,
I'm glad you found the matter of your engine. Now you'll be able to fly again.
How did you know? I was just coming to tell him that I've been successful beyond all hope. And then he didn't answer my question. All he said was,
I'm leaving today too. And then sadly, and much further, it's much more difficult.
I realized that something extraordinary was happening. I was holding him in my arms like a little child, yet it seemed to me that he was dropping headlong into the abyss, and I could do nothing but to hold him back. His expression was very serious now, lost and remote.
I have your sheep, and I have a creep for it in the muzzle, he said. He smiled sadly.
I waited a long time. I could feel he was reviving a little. Little fellow, you were frightened. Of course he was frightened. And he laughed a little.
I'll be much more frightened tonight.
Once again I felt chilled by the sense of something irreparable. And I realized I couldn't bear the thought of never hearing that laugh again. For me, it was like a spring of fresh water in the desert.
Little, I want to hear you laugh again. But he said to me, tonight, it'll be a year. My star will be above the place where I fell last year. Little fellow, it's a bad dream, isn't it? All this is conversation with the snake and the meeting place of the star. But he didn't answer my question. All he said was, the unimportant thing is what you can't be seen. Of course. It's the same as for the flower. If you love a flower that gives you a star, then it's good. At night, you'll look up in the sky. All stars are blossoming. Of course. It's the same for the water. The water you gave me to drink was like music on account of the pulley and the rope. You remember, it was good. Of course. At night, you look up at the stars. It's too small where I live for me to show you where my star is. It's better that way. My star will be one of the stars for you. So you will look at something at all of them. They'll all be your friends. And besides, I have a present for you. He laughed again. Oh, little fellow, I love hearing that laugh. That'll be my present. Just that. It'll be the same as for the water. What do you mean? People have stars, but they aren't the same. For travelers, the stars are guides. For other people, they're nothing but tiny lights. And for all others, for scholars, the problems, for my businessmen, they were gold. But all those stars are silent stars. You, though, you'll have stars like nobody else. What do you mean? When you look at the sky at night, since I'll be living in one of them, since I'll be laughing in one of them, for you it'll be as full as the stars are laughing. You have the stars that can laugh. And then you laughed again. And when you're consoled, everyone eventually is consoled, you'll be glad you've known me. You'll always be my friend. You'll feel laughing with me. And you'll open your window sometimes just for the fun of it. And your friends will be amazed to see you laughing while you're still looking up at the skies. And you'll tell them, yes, it's the stars that always made me laugh. And they'll think you're crazy and the nasty trick I played on you. He laughed again. It'll be as if I had given you, instead of the stars, a lot of tiny bells that know how to laugh. And he laughed again. He grew serious once more. Tonight, don't come. I won't leave you. It'll look as if I'm suffering. It'll look like a little as if I'm dying. It'll look that way, but don't come see me. Don't see that. It's not worth the trouble. I won't leave you. But he was anxious. I'm telling you this on account of the snake. He mustn't bite you. Snakes are nasty sometimes. They bite just for fun. I won't leave you. Then something reassured him. It's true. They don't have enough poison for a second bite. That night, I didn't see him leave. He got away without making a sound. When I managed to catch up with him, he was walking fast with determination. All he said was, you're here. And he took my hand, but he was still anxious. You were wrong to come. You'll suffer. It'll look as I'm dead. It won't be true. I said nothing. You'll understand. It's too far. I can't take this body with me. It's too heavy. I said nothing. But I'll have an old abandoned shell. There's nothing sad about an old shell. I said nothing. He was a little disheartened now, but he made one more effort. It'll be nice, I'll be looking at the stars too. All the stars and all the wells of the rusty pulley. All stars are full of water for me to drink. I said nothing. And it'll be fun. You'll have 500 million little bells. I'll have 500 million springs of fresh water. And he too said nothing because he was weeping. Here's the place. Let me go alone. And he sat down because he was frightened. And then he said, my flower, I'm responsible for her, and she's so weak and so naive. She has 4 ridiculous thorns to defend her against the world. I sat down too because I was unable to stand any longer. He said, there, that's all. He hesitated a little longer, then stood up. He took a step. I couldn't move. There had been nothing but a yellow flash close to an ankle. He remained motionless for an instant. He didn't cry out. He fell gently, like the way a tree falls. There wasn't even a sound because of the sand. Chapter 27. And now, of course, it's been 6 years already. Never told this story before. The friends who saw me again were very glad to see me alive. I was sad, but I told them. It's fatigue. Now I'm somewhat consoled. That is, not entirely. But I know he did get back to his planet because at the daybreak I didn't find his body. It wasn't much a heavy body. And at night I loved listening to the stars. It was like 500 million little bells. But something extraordinary has happened. When I drew the muzzle for the little prince, I forgot to put on a leather strap. He could never have fastened it to a sheep, and then I wondered what happened there on the planet. Maybe the sheep had eaten the flower. Sometimes I tell myself, of course not. Little Prince puts his flower under a glass, and he keeps it close watch over the sheep. Then I'm happy, and all the stars laugh sleepily. Sometimes I tell myself anyone might be distracted once in a while, and that's all it takes. One night, he'd forgotten to put it under the glass, or else sheep got without making any noise during the night. Then the bells were all changed to tears. It was all a great mystery for you who love the little prince too. As for me, nothing in the universe can be the same if somewhere, no one knows where, a sheep will never saw has or has not eaten the rose. Look up at the sky. Ask yourself,
Has the sheep eaten the flower or not? And you will see everything changes. And no grown-up will ever understand how such a thing would be so important.